Hello, 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 and welcome to Wine Folly's French wine course. We are so excited to have you here joining us live on the YouTubes. And so I have with me here Christine Marsiglio, who is amazing. And she is going to talk to us a little bit about the course, and I'm going to talk with you a little bit about her. And hold on, let me adjust some sound things. I'm having too many sounds going on at once in my headphones. All right, whew, we should have tested that too, guys. But no worries. So let's talk a little bit about what is in store for you and a little bit of background about this course because it's very different than what we've done before and what you might have seen before in the out there worlds. And we're very inspired by online education. And so thank you so much for joining us here for that. Okay, a little background about Wine Folly and what brought us here. I co-founded Wine Folly back in 2011. It was like a dream of mine to do something on the internet with wine, but I didn't know how exactly to do that. And so that led to creating a blog, and we started creating all these visual ways to learn about wines, posters and maps, and that led to our first book, Wine Folly: The Essential Guide, which got on the New York Times bestseller list. It was like a few rows below, like super green smoothies, in the food and wines foods section of the New York Times bestseller list. But we were so happy and excited to have a wine book on the bestseller list. It means people are interested about learning more about wine. And second book comes out. That was in 2018, and that one won a James Beard Award. It was a total refactor of the first book. I actually took what I learned from the first book and just rethought about every single page, every single type of thing, and thought if I could get you to be a certified sommelier, essentially, by looking at this book, what would you need? What guide would you carry with you while you're studying and practicing and trying to get that level of knowledge? Because having that level of knowledge feels awesome. Does it not feel awesome, Christine? All right, so that's enough about me. I want to introduce you to Christine and stop talking about myself and Wine Folly. Christine joined us this last year, and she's joining us from London, which is why we're posting a little early. And for you early folks on the other side of the world who are ahead of us, back over here on the West Coast, Christine is a master of wine. She is basically the valedictorian. Okay, this is silly for me to say this, but aren't you kind of the valedictorian of Master of Wines? She got the Boulanger Award, which I think only 32 people have that award. So yeah,
Yeah,
so
pretty cool that one. Yeah.
so when I geek out about wine and soil types, she is right there with me, and maybe right up there a little bit more. You also are do you have a degree in what is your degree specifically in? Because I don't remember how it's called. Because you went to France to get that degree, didn't you?
Yeah, I studied in France for 2 years. I did a master's in enology and viticulture, which is just a fancy way of saying grape growing and winemaking. So I did that for 2 years in France, which, was pretty fun, actually. If you're going to study something for 2 years, wine's a pretty fun thing to do. Yeah, and then moved over to London after that and just kept learning because I just love learning about wine. And even now, every day, I'm still learning something new about wine. And one of my favorite things to do is pass along that knowledge to other people. Hence
So
why Wine Folly.
so that's what one of the cool things is when we were talking with you, you were actually making programming for Wine and Spirits Education Trust, and we were talking about education and how to do things differently. And you had a lot of really you have an amazing education background, but you also had some you were like right there along with, yes, let's do this, let's do something new, let's do something different, let's try this out. So can you, like, so we just put together this course, and this was a huge effort on your part. uh, I kind of want to ask this question that I told you not to bring up because it was not about the course specifically, it was kind of about you. But can you tell me what it was like, what some of the things were doing, what was different about making a course this way?
Yeah, so making a course this way was challenging for me because I'm quite used to teaching in person, and you get that kind of immediate feedback from people, and you can answer questions immediately. but then trying to create something that's going out there to people who have all sorts of experience levels, people who may not know anything about wine to people who know lots about a specific wine region, and trying to anticipate what kind of questions could come up, and also continue to make it as engaging and actually even more engaging than an in-person session was something that I really found challenging, but I loved doing it, and creating that with you, Madeline, was really quite fun. And I think what we've come up with is something really special and quite unique, and that will be really, really engaging for all of you who've chose to join us on this awesome journey of French wine learning.
That's awesome. That's really great. So I actually really want to show you guys, because that's kind of what it's all about, uh, what is going on here. So maybe a little bit of inception, but Crom, stay tuned. I'm gonna try clicking the share screen button and let's see if this works. Okay, here goes. Ah! Okay, we're gonna have a little bit of inception for a minute, but maybe this works. Hey, Christine, can you let me know? Can you or does it? Can you see what I? Can you see my screen? Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. Great. Okay. So sorry about that. So here's the course. Here's what it's going to experience. Here's what it's going to feel like to you. We have different modules, as you can see right here on the far left side of the screen here. We've got the pre-class and welcome setup. That's me yammering on about what you need to get started. And in this section, very important to pay attention here, we've got needs and nice to haves. This is the thing that you need right here. It's the French wine course worksheet, which Monique on our team went through the entire course and built a worksheet custom for you, and it's amazing. And this is the only requirement that you must have to do this course, is to take this and print it out. And if you see here, you have the opportunity to fill in the maps and learning. And one of the things that we've learned about learning and online learning is that having that physical action of writing things down is super, super important. So I love this worksheet. Many eyes have looked at this worksheet to make sure it looks great for you. And then there's some nice to haves down here too. If you need some extra supplies, I've made some quick links in here for that. But again, it's a nice to have, it's not a need to have. Our sections of the course, and I'll talk a little bit about my stuff, but maybe Christine, you can talk a little bit about what you have. We start off with just an overview that tells you what you're about to get into, because it's nice to know. But then these little intro videos are my contribution, and they're essentially the theme of each module. So for example, in Northern France, we're exploring pairing wine and food. And I go on a little adventure to pair wine and food, and to try to pair wines with wines from the Northern France region with food. And maybe you can talk a little bit more about how that incorporates into your section, where we actually get into the deep dive, these videos that we have on these various regions of France. And I will stop casting and you can talk.
No, it's I really like the way that that we've ended up setting this out, because Madeline does a great introduction to kind of prep you for the things that you should be thinking about to maybe help with you actually, doing something, not just passively learning along with us, but in the end you're gonna on your if you choose to do one of your own projects. So Madeline preps you for that at the beginning, and then I kind of give you all the in-depth knowledge of that particular region, while always kind of referring back to this kind of task that you might be doing at the end. So in the case of Northern France, thinking about food and wine pairing. So I'll give you little hints and a little bit of breadcrumbs along the way and say, oh, this kind of wine works really well with this kind of fish, or that kind of thing. At the same time, you're learning the different grapes, the climate, the types of wines that are made there. And also one of the, I think, coolest things that we both tried to really incorporate into the course is giving you little hints and tips about where to find some really great value within France, because there are some amazing places, even in places that you might not expect, such as Bordeaux and Burgundy, where you can actually find some really, really great value wines that won't cost an arm and a leg. So that's one of the coolest things I think about the course that we have as well.
on this topic. So at the end of each of these modules, you'll get, I give you a little primer to challenge you to go out and try this challenge that I just did and that you've done all this learning on. And what it should do in theory is solidify that knowledge. You just took in a lot of information, and now that you need to use that information to go do something. Doing is what gets us to really hold this information that's just floating around in space into our mind when we actually have to apply it. So that these challenges are optional. Go buy wines, go buy a bottle of wine at a restaurant, go pair wine and food, try to start a wine collection, buy wine as a gift. All of these will set you through real world challenges where you actually be like, oh my God, I have to buy a wine. Where, how, what? With what? With whom? And all of these questions you'll be asking will force you down the line of consideration to think like a sommelier. So your final project is required, and that is to curate your own wine list. And I've given two options. We've created two options for you to follow, and I'll just show you what they look like. These totally recommend printing them out and filling them out. Is one of them is a course pairing with wine. And this is awesome if you are really into food, you are a home chef, or you are a chef yourself, or you work in a restaurant and you really want to solidify that knowledge with food and wine pairing. We've selected a bunch of menu items and given you lots of hints in those menu items, but you have the entire world of France to work with, and your job is to pair these wines, pair these foods with different wines. And then the other one, and anyone who's interested in wine education or in wine marketing or in any realm of that kind of a world, and you're just excited about, or if you're super excited about French, you're a Francophile, I would highly recommend the course pairing options. You can do both if you want to, and that's amazing, but you don't have to. So the course pairing option is basically, we just taught this course. Now, what wines would you pair with them? Here are the different sections that we talked about. Here's some inspiration. You have the whole course for inspiration. And because Christine, you actually talk about specific areas, don't you? When you are talking about all these different regions.
Really interesting for me. So I essentially did this task in creating the course because you'll probably see if you go through the videos, if you haven't yet. There are optional tasting videos where I'm actually tasting the wines, and I have picked some wines to show you and go through. So I actually did that task on my own, and that was really fun because it actually made me think about, okay, how can I, what kind of aromas would I expect from a cool climate, or, what happens to these wines as it starts to get warmer? So it made me kind of reflect on what I was going to teach all of you out there by helping me by reflecting on what wines I was looking for. So that was really interesting. And the coolest thing too is then you get to taste the wines that you're choosing too, and you can share it with other people, and then you can actually teach them about the wines too, which will really, really cement your knowledge. So when we're learning, we take things in, we do things, and the final step is teaching other people. And if you can teach somebody else about what you've learned, then you have got that. It's going to stay in here forever and ever.
True. That's true. Actually, that's true. One of the reasons I started Wine Folly was to help force me to learn about all these regions, because here I had to tell people, simplify them enough so that they were understandable. So this is your opportunity to do that. And there is one thing, special that we set up because we thought we must do it for all the pre-launch people, was to set up a community where you can ask questions, provide feedback, or just post how it's going as you do it. And the way this is set up is we kind of think it's going to take a week per module. And that's at a casual, like, hey, let's do it on a weeknight. Let's watch a couple of these videos and then kind of figure out what our plan is. Let's food and wine pairing. Let's make some dinner, maybe one of the weeknights or weekend, and have fun with this. And so, 4 modules, 4 weeks, it's probably going to take that as a casual, fun rate, and take your notes down and reflect on them and really help, crystallize that information in your brain to allow it to set in. And so I think that's what we're expecting it should take. Of course, some of you might go take a little bit longer, some of you might take shorter, and that's totally okay. But we do have a space, and it will be open for about a month, and we will be active in that space during that time. And I think we might have sent you a link on, and maybe you can post up the link to Phil on live YouTube live. Grab that link to the community and post it up in the comments. I don't know if anyone has access. We gave all our pre-launchers access to the community, so you can log in and post in there. And the idea is it's a small group of people, and you can communicate with each other, and we can provide support in there. But it's really an opportunity for you to show and tell what's going on, and to share your experience as you go through this course. Yeah, so that's a lot of what's going on here, and I think that we were hoping to hear some of you folks' questions and find out a little bit more about that kind of a thing. But we have some things going on with French wine we wanted to sort of talk about and sort of prime you for. So QA will come in a bit, but keep this in mind if you've got specific questions for us. They are coming up. So we'd love to answer your questions. So think about what you'd like to ask. And I have some questions, of course, for Christine, because we went through this course together and had a lot of fun with it. And so we had some sort of tips and primers and ideas and answers for you to get you started on your adventure into French wine. So one of my biggest questions was, why is French wine, and maybe you can start us off, Christine, with your answer, but why is it so important to know about French wine today?
Yeah, I think that's a really valid question. Sometimes we just assume, like, yeah, you have to start in France, and that's generally the way people go. But when you asked me that, I thought, why is it that we always start here? And I think one of the main reasons is that a lot of what France has done with winemaking has been proliferated in so many other parts of the world, and not just the winemaking aspect, but the grapes that they use. So a lot of the grapes that are really, kind of their homeland is France, such as Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon. These are super, super popular grapes all around the world. So that's generally why I think starting with France will give you a really good understanding of course, the wines of France, but will also give you this kind of road into other parts of the wine world. So, Cabernet Sauvignon is planted all over California and, in many other countries, South Africa, Australia. Chardonnay is found pretty much everywhere. So learning kind of like the basics in France really sets you up and gives you that base level knowledge to then go explore the rest of the wine world too.
And perfect. They are such a huge influencer on the grapes, these what we call international varieties. If you look up all the international varieties, I did this. I was like, everybody's always talking about what are the noble grapes, and I'm like, well, I'll look them up. Well, most of the noble grapes are based on French aesthetic, essentially. Even though there are some other ones in other countries that are just absolutely amazing, they just haven't made that list because they're not internationally renowned yet. Another reason why French wine is important today is, and this was the other side, which I think is they have been an influencer in the past 200 years, and it's greatly affected what we drink today. But what's crazy is that France is still innovating today. Their agricultural community is extremely progressive. They now have a natural wine category, for example, and they farming methods, things that are changing in France are continually influencing winemakers around the world. And so to have a bead on what's going on over there is a really great way to stay on top of some sort of top popular and progressive movements that are happening in the wine world today. Awesome. All right. So another thing. Oh yeah, this is a fun question. Christine, maybe kick us off again. So what was one thing that you learned while putting this course together? And this is we have to admit that as educators, we have to learn too a little bit.
I'm constantly learning. I mean, we do the just to give you an example of constant learning. We put together region guides at Wine Folly, and every time we do one of those, I'm learning so much. So, you don't just reach a certain level and then stop. You really do learn, continue to learn every day. And when I was reflecting on the course, there was a lot of things I learned, but I think when I came to Beaujolais, I always had this idea that Beaujolais was fresh and fruity and easy drinking and not generally meant to age, which for the vast majority of wines is fairly true. But I really started looking into it a little bit deeper and found out actually there are some crus there. There are 10 crus, and there are a few that produce these really interesting, powerful wines that kind of age a little bit like red Burgundy. I was like, whoa, you can find amazing wines here for a fraction of the cost of red Burgundy that can have similar characteristics. So that got me really, really excited as well. So there's some definitely learning in there for me, and that got transmitted to the course as well, which was quite fun.
Really great. Actually, you're totally right about those Beaujolais Crus. Really mind-changing wines. So the thing that I learned was I'm super. Well, I have been not maybe not now. Actually, I think this course actually helped me. It pushed me over the edge to force myself to learn about Burgundy, and I've always been very nervous about. And when I say learn, I mean taste the wines because you can be extremely book read, but when you actually put the rubber to the pavement, and that's tasting the wines in this case, is when you really get to know. You get to have a representation of all that knowledge in your mouth. And for some reason that just makes everything make sense. And so you said in the course you were talking about Givry Chambertin, Charm Chambertin. You were talking about a very fancy appellation for Pinot Noir in the Côte d'Or. And the way you described it made me realize that's my jam. So when I went out and started tasting some wines, I was no longer. Burgundy's super producer focused because it's a very producer focused region, and suddenly I like let go of my knowledge, like it it kind of crystallized for me. Like producers are all over the place and you don't know what's right because it's like wading through a million different brands. Whereas but when you focus on those appellations being like, I like this appellation, I know this producer's pretty good, I want to try this appellation from this producer, let's see what they can do. And that's what I did when I went out to buy the wine in the restaurant and taste the wine there. It was very expensive and it was totally worth the effort. So that's what I learned about the course. So thank you for making me confident in Burgundy.
No, you're welcome. I think that's Burgundy and Bordeaux can be really kind of scary when you're first looking at them because the prices can be high and there's a lot of different appellations. And I think that's one of the coolest things that this course really tackles. Instead of kind of putting those areas on a pedestal and say, okay, you must revere these areas, we kind of break them down and make them much more digestible. And I think that makes it more accessible, which therefore makes it a lot less scary. And I think that's the
Yeah.
best thing about wine education, to just take those barriers down for everybody.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's really great. So I think that kind of is the biggest thing that we would like you to learn is to have those barriers to create that confidence in yourselves. And we talked about Burgundy and Bordeaux, but I want to mention how awesome some of these alternative regions are that we also mentioned in the course. So one of the things, like when you learn about wine, you're often told, well, this is what's really important that everybody cares about. And we definitely included that because it's kind of one of those things where if you find yourself in a group of people who know a lot about wine, they've been taught that. So they know what's big and important, and they're going to talk about that. And you can talk about those too. We're giving you the tools to be confident in that awkward, I don't know, wine swirling situation whenever that happens, because it happens. And but the thing that we also added, because we were like, no, that is not enough, is yes, you should know about Chinon from the Loire Valley. But if you're looking for a super duper value that is Cabernet Franc, you should try a Saumur Champagny. And I tasted one in one of the little primer videos, and I was actually blown away at how amazing these wines are for crazy value. It was, I think it was like $14 for the 14 USD for the bottle, and I was like, "What? This is better than Chinon. This is amazing." So we have a lot of what Christine did was not only give you the this is what you should know, the boss wine situation, but it's these undercover secret under the radar appellations that make great stuff that you could try and maybe save some bucks on if you're planning to build your maybe if you're planning to build your list and actually go and buy all these wines for the course. You might check out some of these alternative appellations that she mentions. So yeah, that is some of the things we're super excited about. So I wanted to give us a chance to maybe ask some questions, or maybe, I don't know, Christine, if you had some ideas, if you had any questions for me or for us or for our audience.
Yeah, I guess for the audience, it would be kind of cool to know if people wanted to mention, what they're most excited about the course, or maybe what they're most scared of when it comes to French wine, because I think a lot of people find French wine really intimidating. So maybe just understanding where people are coming from and why they wanted to take the course, and what they're fearful about with French wine and what they're really excited about. That's three questions, I guess. So maybe pick one, and if you want to answer in the chat, that'd be cool too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's yeah. So I guess if I kind of have a question for you, Christine, because one of the things that you might be taking this course on is to become more confident with French wine to pass a certification and to pass
definitely.
some kind of like if you're doing your WSET, if you're working towards Master of Wine, for you in that process, can you tell us a little bit more about those steps that brought you to Master of Wine? Because I'm really just curious to know, you know, and everyone should hear that because it might be something someone is considering who's out in the audience or hasn't considered and might want to consider. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I got really interested in wine. I was, drinking some pretty uh, interesting is maybe the right word, wine in university, and then I ended up tasting this really amazing wine from Bordeaux, and it kind of blew my mind because I was like, "Whoa, wine can taste like this!" And that started me on a journey of wanting to learn more. And I did that with WSET. So I did level 2, 3, and then I did the diploma, and then I was kind of thinking, oh, I still want to learn more. At the same time, in the middle of all this, I was doing a master's in enology and viticulture because I'm a real nerd. I did an undergraduate degree in chemistry and wanted to combine my love of chemistry and microbiology with wine. So then did that in France. And then, yeah, those qualifications gave me a good foundation, to then go and do the Master of Wine program. And that was a challenge. It took 4 years. You can only do it in a minimum of 3. And part of that was really trying to understand, obviously, the theory behind a lot of stuff. And so we talked to you guys about the theory in the course, but it's not just memorization. It's really the actual understanding of why wines taste the way they do. And I really tried to transmit that as much as possible, through to the course. So instead of just saying, "Oh yeah, Sancerre is made from Sauvignon Blanc," trying to get under the skin a little bit of why is Sauvignon Blanc planted there instead of something else, for example. And I think if you make those connections, then they stay for a lot longer, and it will really make you more successful in kind of any wine exam that you're going to partake in, because you'll have the understanding rather than the kind of rote memorization, which can kind of go in and then go out very quickly. So yeah, and then I became a Master of Wine in 2019. Yeah, just before 2020. And yeah, it's been a fun ride ever since. Just continually learning every day. So
That actually brings me to a really interesting question that I think might be illuminating. Let's say you are approaching a wine region for the first time for whatever reason you haven't heard of it, hasn't been on your radar, what would you do? What route do you take to learn about that region as an expert, from an expert's perspective? What do you do?
So actually, this was my first interaction with Wine Folly was maps, because my first thing was I need to know what this place looks like, because really winemaking and growing grapes is all about cartography and knowing what the weather is like. So I was like, oh, I need to find some good wine maps, and of course, Wine Folly has some of the best wine maps out there. And so, yeah, really learning the geography about the place, the geology too. So the kind of soils that they have there. Is it sunny? Is it warm? Is it rainy? So understanding the climate and the topography, and then looking at the kind of grapes that they grow there, gives
Wow.
me generally a really strong understanding of what kind of wines they might make there. And then of course tasting wine to understand it a bit better helps too.
So you really take a backed out approach first when you get into wine. You actually look at the area, and then you think about how the climate affects that area and how it probably affects all agriculture in that
Yeah.
area.
Yeah,
That's
definitely. Because I mean, wine in the end is an agricultural product. So understanding where it's grown and how it's grown are really fundamental in understanding why it tastes the way it does.
that's awesome. That's awesome. All right, that's one question. Uh, so, do we have any questions coming through, Phil, on live? All right, it looks like somebody's asking where they can print the manual. Where do they get the manual to print it? Yes, there are a couple of things that you can download on Thinkific when you log in. So when you log into the course, you will log in to the course, and there's a worksheet in the primer section of the course, and then at the end, in the final project, you can actually download those your final project and fill it in that way. I had a couple of crazy ideas. Like, if you fill out your final project, you might want to post it up on the community and share it with others, and share the wines that you found if you've taken the time to do that, because it is going to be a fair amount of work, and you'll probably be really proud and excited about what you've created. So that was one idea, is like, take a few shots, post them up. We'd love to see your work. Another way to do that would be if you make a carousel in Instagram. If you're on Instagram, you can make a carousel of your course and just tag the hashtag French wine course. We're actually monitoring that hashtag. So if you pop something in there, we'll definitely take a look if you're on social media. And that would be another way you can share what you're up to. Or if you're just sharing the process along the way, you're welcome to tag that. We're so excited to see what people are doing again. So if you feel the need to pull your phone out and point it at things, throw a hashtag in there. We love to look. We're very excited about what you all come up with.
There's some good questions or comments coming in now about hopes and fears for the course, which is good. And it seems Brent's saying looking forward to proper pronunciation and knowing what's in the bottle, because the label doesn't tell you that with French wine. You're absolutely right. I think I kept mentioning, when you go through the course, you're gonna you're gonna see that I mentioned quite a few times. Oh, and by the way, you're not gonna see this grape on the label, because that's, I think, one of the things that makes French wine and some other regions within Europe really intimidating, because it just says, a place, and it doesn't tell you what grape it is, because you're expected to know that place grows a certain grape. So there's all these kind of barriers to understanding, and this course is definitely really going to help
Yeah.
get you over those barriers.
Christine actually gives you a trick where you don't necessarily even need to know what grapes are in that wine to understand how it will taste. And once you learn this trick, this tactic, it's going to empower how you look at every wine region in the world, regardless of whether you know the grapes that are used there or the names of the regions that are there. So there's some tactical learning that we're going to do, and if you actually taste some wines from the great thing about France is, in the north, it's cold. If you've been to Paris in June, you're like, it's somewhat sunny and rainy and kind of cool. But then if you're in June, if it's June and you're down in the southern and along the Riviera there, the French Riviera, it's hot. So we have a wide range of climates to explore in France. And if you taste wines from the north and from the south and you compare them side by side, you're going to see a major difference, stylistic difference in those wines. And that is going to help tie all these pieces together for you. All right, some more questions coming in. Tend to be I'm trying to pick a wine. Oh, reach a destination without a map or compass. A bit like trying to reach. Yes. Hoping this course gives me some pieces. Yes. So this is going to be fun because when you go to a wine store, this is actually, and this is going to date me, possibly, but I used to walk into a movie store when they had
Yeah.
movie stores to walk into and become overwhelmed with choice. And
Mm.
you don't know, did I want a drama tonight? Was I what was I interested? Like you have all these ideas in your head before you even walk in there, and then you walk in there and you become blanked out by this overwhelming amount of choice. And so one of the things we're going to do in this process of learning is actually direct you with a goal and a purpose. So you're going to walk in the store being like, I need to watch Tarantino films. This is what I was meant to do. I am going to do a survey on this genre of wines. And so that is going to get you to a part of the store. And then your choice, which was once hundreds or perhaps thousands, depending on where you go to shop, uh, your choice suddenly becomes down to this area. And with that focused choice, you still have a lot of selection to make, but you've been primed with an expectation on what you're going to get, and uh, you know you have the tools, the mental tools to look at that label and to identify what you should be looking for. So yeah,
Yeah,
great question.
that's a good question. And even me still, when I go into a wine shop, you hit this wall of wine and you're like, oh, what do I do here? Because there's just so many different labels. I mean, the wine industry is so fractured, like there's so many different producers. So to have an idea of the style of wine that you want and then say, oh, I like light bodied, high in acid, red fruited wines, to say, oh, well, those come from cool climates. I'll maybe look at a region that has a cool climate. And so it also gives you the confidence to try something new, which a lot of people are scared to do with wine because, you're normally putting down more than just a couple of dollars and then you don't know what it tastes like. There's normally not a try before you buy situation going on. So that knowledge is so powerful to feel more confident in what you're buying.
Really happy to hear from you, Michelle, that you are finally taking those first steps into getting a formalized wine education. I love that. And we're very excited about this course and the potential to do more like it. So hopefully you'll be seeing more from us coming soon in that regard. So this idea of non-formal versus formal, I want to, part of me wants to put it to bed. Like I'm Christine has a formal education and is an expert's expert. She has a viticulture and enology degree. She is a master of wine. I have an informal education. I may have gotten to certified sommelier, but after that, most of my education is self-taught, and it's what makes and so it doesn't matter which path you choose to do. You can go formal education route and you can go non-formal education route. What is the purpose? The formal helps because it gives you this structure where it forces you to do the work and force yourself to learn about something. But if non-formal works for you too, it could give you all you might need is the inspiration and motivation to go out and to dive in deeper. This course might, for example, expose you to a wine region that you've never heard of and that you're very interested in, or a type of wine that you're not interested in, and you might go do a deep dive on that. And that's what I'd love to see in the community, by the way. If you post up, if you find yourself deep diving into an area that you've always wanted to know more about and never had the confidence to dive into, or just didn't even know it existed, this is what drives us is for us who are who have a self-taught background, is this desire to learn more and to know why. So if you find yourself asking the question, well, why is that, and somebody gives you sort of a not a real answer, well, it
Mm.
is that way because it is that way. If you hear anything like that, that's your opportunity to dive deeper, actually, to be like, well, I want to know why, and I'm going to go find out. And so I would encourage you, if you have those types of questions, post them up in the community board. If you are trying to dive deeper in something and you need help getting there, or want just a soupçon of something to get you past the blocker, that I would encourage you, because you might find that you're motivated. It's in there. It's like inside of you.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I agree. Like, always asking that why question is really how you get into a deep dive of understanding um, wine, but in generally everything.
Life.
Yeah, I've got a few kids, and they ask why a lot, but they're learning. We've got Joe asked, appellations have always been a bit overwhelming to me. How much do you anticipate we will dive into that? Yeah, we definitely dive into a lot regarding the appellations, but not just, rote memorization of these are the appellations of Bordeaux. It's more understanding, what to expect from certain appellations because of, maybe their climate or their soils or the grapes that are grown there. So it will give you that understanding to feel a little bit more confident. And, if we don't cover one appellation in depth in that particular region, you can then kind of take the knowledge that you've learned and say, okay, I know it has these kind of soils, this kind of grape, this kind of climate. It probably tastes like this. So you can start kind of, assuming certain things based on what you're learning. So I think that's also helpful.
Yeah, it's rote memory is not going to work, because in France alone, there's over what 363 appellations, or 300. Like there's a
So many.
non-memorizable number of
Yeah.
appellations. Like maybe we can hold 20 items in a list in our mind, or maybe if you're really dope at it. So and you can become familiar with a great number, 50 or hundreds of more appellations, or recognize where it is.
Mm.
Oh, I think that appellation might be in this area. And that's certainly something you'll want to do if you're trying to pass an advanced sommelier type of course. But is it going to help you understand what the wine is all about there? Like, is it going to really help you become empowered to find and buy wines that you like? And so instead of like focusing on that rote memory, we want to focus more on why, what, and why, and maybe a little bit of how, because that explains it too. So with that knowledge, you can apply it on any region. So outside of France, we can go to any region for Spain or Italy or Slovenia, and discover that region with this sort of backed out aesthetic that Christine, you mentioned, looking at a map. It really comes down to that, starting with this backed out perspective.
Awesome.
Yes, you're welcome, Matt. Thank you so much for everyone who is asking great questions, and taking the risk and jumping into learning more formally about wine. It's very, very exciting.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's super exciting to be able to share knowledge about wine too, and just getting people excited about wine. I think it's something that sometimes wine can almost be thought of as a commodity, like, yeah, just throw a bottle in when you're grocery shopping. But really, like, understanding the history, the soils, the climate, the people who work in these areas, and wanting to learn more about it, it's really like there is no other product on earth that has a history, a story, a place about it. I mean, maybe cheese, maybe, but I would say wine is really unique that way, and that makes it really special to teach about and to
you
learn
know,
about.
it's funny because you actually, learning about wine actually changed the way I learn about food in general. Like, for
Totally.
example,
Too.
I will not, I do not just put things in my mouth anymore like I used to. Sounds ridiculous. But smelling things, smelling spices, trying
Mm,
to identify flavors before I take a bite.
yep.
I even smell my water glasses now, and I'm like, oh, that actually smells dirty. Like you catch things. It needs to go back into the wash. Like you catch things that you don't normally, because you're slowing down so much to take that
Hmm.
taste of wine, to smell before you taste. To stop this like movement that we're not really thinking about. We're forcing ourselves to think a little bit more before we make that next step of gestation or whatever. So the the other thing that it taught me was that things are different depending on where you are. You know how the water's different in New York. That's why their pizza's so good in New York. Their water's different there. Well, their fruits and vegetables are different there too. So if you taste an avocado coming from Africa, North Africa, or if you taste an avocado coming from Mexico, these are two very, very different avocados. Or if you taste hothouse grown tomatoes in New York State, or cabbage, just on a good cabbage in cabbage season, if you live in New York, get a piece of just take the cabbage, put it in the put it, steam it a little bit, put some butter on it, and just the cabbage. It is
So good.
amazing what you start tasting in the fruits and vegetables that are just very raw and pure because you've trained your palate with wine. So
Yeah.
that's something that's something I'm really looking forward for people to try.
I think also very similar to what you're saying, wine also has like forced me to think about um food tasting different based on where it's coming from. Exactly that, and so I start thinking, where was this grown? Or, what kind of black pepper is this? Where did this come from? So yeah, definitely, if you like food, wine and food, they go together, not because we have them together, but we start thinking about the provenance of all these things. And I think it's really cool.
All right, so we have a great question coming in about how do I find wines for this course, and what exactly am I going to be able to find comparable wines to what you have featured in the course? Well, here's the fun thing about, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about the wines that you selected in the course and what that process was to help people figure out what they can do.
Yeah, so I tried to find appellations, generally speaking, that most people would be able to source in most places. So, Sancerre, for example, or Puy-Fumé, just to give you an idea. Um, so that if you wanted to, you could taste along. You don't have to. You don't have to go out and buy wines for this course if you don't want to. Um, of course, tasting is always part of learning, so of course we encourage it, but it's definitely not expected. When it comes to buying the wine, we will have, you will have the names of the wine. You'll get the bottle shots of them to see them, so that can help you. There will be some wines that I've tasted that I'm not sure would be available in the United States, for example. But if you can't find that exact wine, that's okay. And actually, I wouldn't even strive to find the exact wine. I would look for that appellation, or maybe a similar grape variety from a neighboring appellation, because really they shouldn't differ too much in most of the cases. So it's really there to show you more about the structure of the wine and the aromas that you might expect, because of the grape, but also because of the climate. um, one thing I would say is that if you have kind of a local or independent wine shop, then you can also go in and ask for recommendations, because everybody who I've ever met who works at a wine shop are just super, super passionate. And you can tell them about the course, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, let me help you find something that works like that. And so I think that will be a really good place to go as well. Saying that, I'm sure there would be some grocery stores, especially maybe wine focused grocery stores, that will definitely have a large selection of the appellations that we taste through the course.
Will probably help you fulfill your final project, which is actually to select wines. And so the challenge is to select wines on your own. And we've created this course to actually force you to do the picking, to become the sommelier. And that's what the real challenge is actually, you don't have to taste along with us. It's not required. We're going to help you identify based on descriptions. She talks a little bit about taste and flavor, so you have an idea in your head on what to expect. And then your job is to go source one. So that's the big difference between us and other courses, is that instead of being handed the answer, you have to go find the answer yourself. And that will make you so much stronger than other course takers in other environments, because you will have selected those wines for the course. And again, this is for the final project. You don't have to taste during while you're in this course at all. You don't even have to do the challenges. But for the final project, you will be selecting individual wines. You don't have to buy them. You just have to select them. You might find yourself wanting to try some after you've picked them out. You'll be like, I am so excited about that wine. I must have whatever it is that you picked out. So that's what we're encouraging, is this desire to find and discover, and to actually go out and fulfill that need.
There's
So yeah.
one really good question that's coming from Michelle about how she has a really good taste of smell sense for food, but when it comes to wine tasting, she's still quite novice with that. And what I would say to that is that just like when it comes to learning anything, it's really all about practice. So just to give you an idea, I personally do not consider myself like a naturally gifted taster. Okay, definitely not. I don't think I, woke up one day and could just pick out all these random smells. Not at all. I definitely trained my nose, trained my palate to identify specific aromas, and I didn't, buy a fancy kit to do that. It was just like, hey, I don't actually know what blackberries taste like, so I'm gonna go buy some blackberries, and then buy that, eat a punnet of blackberries, and okay, now I've got blackberries, to really understand certain aromas and flavors, and that just takes a bit of time and a little bit of effort. But hey, tasting good food and good wine, you'll pick it up over time for sure. And it's something that just really honestly comes with practice. And I honestly feel that anybody in the world can go on to be an excellent taster, if you have the right wines to practice with, and you just actually put in the time as well. So it will come. If you're already a great food taster, you're going to be an excellent wine taster too, Michelle.
Actually, I have a buddy who's a master sommelier, and his sense of smell is actually greatly reduced. So he just uses his palate, and he was able to pass the master sommelier blind tasting, which is very, very difficult,
Wow.
with his palate. So I'm not going to tell his name. The secret will stay with me. But if he can do it, and if you're not confident, just know that it just takes a little bit of effort. And a couple of things, if you've taken the wine styles tasting course, if you're not confident tasting, I would highly recommend taking the wine styles tasting course. That's exactly what that course is about. It's about practice and how to practice and what to pay attention to. And then that is essentially something that you do every single time. If you force yourself to do it every single time you open a new bottle, you will gain knowledge. Because if you like wine as much as we do, you're probably opening a bottle once a week, maybe twice a week, maybe more. And yeah, that's a really good point, Christine. We have, and I'm going to grab mine.
I was just going to say, like, it's good. It's important to taste, but it's also important to record as well.
Yes.
Otherwise,
So
you kind of forget what you tasted and what it tasted like. So yeah,
take
really
notes.
important to write it down.
Even if you have a really great memory, I have so many sommelier buddies who are like, oh yeah, I just know it, you know. I'm like, do you remember what you tasted 2 weeks ago when we were at that tasting? He was like, oh, I liked this one wine, but no, I don't really remember the rest. But is that important? I'm like, yes, it's important. You should have taken your notes down. Of course you should take it. No, you never know when you might need to reference them. So if you take
Totally.
some good notes, and if you, Michelle, you might have the tasting journal, keep using it, keep taking notes and trying out every single time you taste a wine. Just try it out, and that's like, it's almost like going to the gym. Like, I don't want to know. And then you go to the gym and you're like, that was awesome, I feel amazing, oh my god, I did so well, I did good stuff for my body. You're doing good stuff for your palate when you write things down. So I take these, that's why we made these small, so I can take them in my bag with me to dinner. because I go to a lot of tastings and things like that, and people look at me and they're like, "What are you doing? I thought you're like an expert. You don't need to do that." I'm like, "This is why."
No, that's why you're an expert, because you write this down. It's
Yeah,
exactly the reason.
there's no shame in that. So
No,
if I do it,
shame at
you
all.
can do it too.
There's one more question that I think we can look at here from Brent, who says, looking forward to learning tips and suggestions. There's a long history of wine in France, yeah, and the French still setting trends in wine, and what are the cool kids in France drinking out?
Oh,
That's actually a really awesome question. I personally think France is still setting trends. Definitely when it comes to agriculture and different styles of wine. So of course there is, this tradition that's there and won't change, and we don't necessarily want it to change either. But then there are also kind of new and trendy things coming along as well. The Loire Valley is a great place to look at that. There's like tons of biodynamic and orange and natural winemakers there who have also pushed people around the world to do that a little bit more too. So definitely some trends. Madeline, I don't know if you have anything off the top of your head that you would want to say about that.
I'm going to add right to you. I'm going to throw it right on the top of what you said. When you watch the Madeline Picks Collectible Wines intro, pay attention to what my vision is. It's based on what the future in French wine is happening right now. So you're going to make your own vision when you start collecting wines. So I'm not going to try to force my vision upon you. But if you want to know what the cool kids are drinking in France, it's that vision. That is what the new collectible luxury wine marketplace is leaning towards. And that's in the last module. Don't fast forward. Go through the other modules first. But when you watch that, when you get to that section, because we need to build this knowledge before you can skip around if you want. I know if my husband's like that. He likes to skip all over the place. But if you get to that section, what she's talking about, what's happening in Loire, what's happening even in Bordeaux, which is a very classic traditional area, we are seeing a big change happening. It's actually leading the way. Northern Italy and France and parts of California are really actually stepping it up. So that's where we think things are going. That's where my collecting vision is based on. So, yeah.
Good question.
Too.
And you have something happening this evening too, right, Madeline? At 5 p.m. PST, yes. Is that right?
That's right. We're going to do a micro orientation, and then we're going to jump into some tasting of French wines. So if you want to come back then, or if somebody else if you want to join us later, you're welcome to join us later, where it's going to be a little bit more casual, although there will be a micro intro just to walk through the course again and introduce people to the community who missed the session this morning. And that's essentially what we've got for you. And we're so excited that you're all here and joined us on this adventure into French wine. Have a wonderful Friday.
Yeah, have a great time. I'm really sorry I won't make it to the evening one, but it will be like 3 a.m. for me. So I'll be asleep. But I really am so excited that we got to create this course, and that my real hope is that everybody comes away feeling much more confident about French wine, having those kind of scary pronunciation and appellation barriers lifted for them, and you'll feel confident walking into a French wine shop or any wine shop and really picking something that you want to drink and maybe share with friends.
All right, y'all.
Thank you so much.